Start over. Okay. So, hello everyone. It's me, Emily, coming to you again from Legal Aid of Northwest Texas in our Denton office with another presentation brought to you by the wonderful and lovely Decatur Public Library. So I'm going to be joined by two attorneys in my office. One attorney in my office and one from outside our office, but still within our organization, to discuss barrier removal. So we're going to specifically be going over non-disclosure and expunctions for eligible criminal records, as well as driver's license restoration. So Tiffany will be following me with her introduction about expunctions and non-disclosures, and then Brittany Moore is going to be discussing driver's license restoration with you all. So anyway, I'm going to move through this real quick. So Legal Aid of Northwest Texas, we are a nonprofit organization. We strive to meet the legal needs of lots of people in our service area. We help people with civil legal concerns and civil legal issues. So we help low-income, vulnerable, and struggling Texans, North Texans. And of course, as I'm sure you can imagine, there are lots of folks right now because COVID-19 seems to be going on forever. So we offer assistance with a variety of legal issues, wills, estates, consumer protections, public benefits, housing issues, and then, of course, what we're here to talk to you all about today, which is barrier removal. So when I say barrier removal, what I mean is like an obstacle that is preventing someone from bettering their life, whether that be accessing better housing, accessing a better career for themselves, things that come up that make it hard for people to do that. So, like I said, our service area is very large. Our Denton office covers Wise County, but maybe you're watching this presentation and you live in Parker County or Tarrant County. Know that we have an office that's out there that could assist you if and when you need it. So we don't offer assistance with certain things. We can't help with class action lawsuits. We don't help with personal injury cases. We also aren't able to provide assistance in criminal law matters. Of course, the exception being for what we're here to discuss today, which is expunction and non-disclosure agreements. So just bear that in mind. So whenever someone is eligible for our services, and maybe you're watching this presentation and you're thinking, I wonder if I am eligible for services. What you need to think about is if you're income eligible. So if someone is income eligible for our services, they meet a certain threshold that's within 200% of the federal poverty guidelines. I'll show you an example of that and tell you maybe where you could look for that yourself if you're interested in finding out more about it. Whenever you sign up for our services, you have to be asset eligible, which means that, we're trying to provide services for people who really need it. So sometimes, if there is someone who has $250,000 sitting in a savings account, they might be able to use that money in order to pay for an attorney, right? So maybe they don't need our services as badly as someone who has no money in savings. In order to get services, unfortunately, there isn't a whole lot that we're able to provide in the way of help to individuals who don't have a legal status, the exception of that being we are able to provide services for people, for victims and survivors of domestic violence. We can help individuals with litigation related to that domestic violence. So we can help someone get a divorce from their abuser. We can help someone get a protective order against their abuser. But aside from maybe those exceptions, individuals have to have a qualifying legal status or be a U.S. citizen in order to receive services through our organization. And of course, individuals have to have a legal problem that we can help you with, right? We can't help people with criminal law matters, personal injury matters, stuff like that. So these are our 2021 federal poverty guidelines. I'm sorry, this isn't a very clear image. I just actually got it today. But this information is also available on our website. We update it every year. So this is kind of how we look at the financial eligibility of people who qualify for our services. So you can see that there's a household size. So we think about your household as, as the people that you're legally obligated to support. So maybe husband and wife, two parents, maybe grandparents taking care of a grandchild, maybe someone living by themselves, something like that, people legally obligated to support one another. And so these are just, some more detailed examples of issues that we provide assistance with. But of course, what we're here today to discuss is barrier removal. So talking about driver's license restoration, occupational driver's licenses, expunction and non-disclosure of criminal records that are eligible. So just kind of why these things are very important. Criminal record information can obviously prevent people from getting better housing. It can prevent people from getting better employment. And that applies to individuals, even if they weren't necessarily convicted of a crime. As you see in the second point, criminal record information is often sold to third parties who will put that information online, and then they'll charge people money to get that information taken off. And so, of course, if you're applying for a job, if you're applying for housing, those people type their name into Google and that comes up. Even if it wasn't someone who was convicted of that crime, it still shows up and maybe they lose that opportunity. And of course, not having a state ID, not having a driver's license is really, really difficult. And it's, of course, essential to getting benefits into driving, one of the most basic privileges that a lot of people are able to do. So in order to get access to their benefits, in order to take their children to school, in order to get to medical appointments, which is of course more important than ever because, right now COVID testing is done through, a lot of the times it's done through cars, drive-throughs, same with a lot of vaccine distribution right now. So, and of course, people have to be able to verify their identity. And when someone gets a ticket that they can't afford to pay, or someone has a ticket that's been sitting in their past for a long time that they aren't able to pay, what happens is it perpetuates this cycle where people aren't able to pay that ticket. So they choose between paying that ticket and maybe something much more essential like buying groceries for themselves or paying for childcare for their children or paying their utility bill. And that ticket sits there and eventually it becomes a warrant, or it sits there, the person's license expires and they aren't able to renew their license because maybe they have a ticket from 5 years ago that they aren't able to pay. And so that person will keep driving with an expired license because they have to take their kids to school, they have to get to work, they get another ticket, and then, et cetera, goes on and on and on. So that's why these things are so important to help individuals with, because, it's important for people to have access to good jobs, good housing, and be able to provide and take care for themselves. So just very briefly, before I introduce the next presenter, our offices are temporarily closed to the public due to COVID-19, but we're still open all of our regular hours. You can go to our website where you can find our Denton office location for more information. You can also call our Denton office at 940-217-2508 and leave a message. We'll follow up with you for services. We also have a hotline that you can call with extended hours. So there's lots of different ways that you can apply through services for your organization. We also have this great resource if maybe someone is being impacted by an eviction, which of course has happened to lots of people throughout COVID-19. We have a stoptxeviction.org website with English and Spanish that's available in English and Spanish, has lots of forms and important information that's free there for people to educate themselves. And then finally, we offer legal clinics in Wise County. These are the dates that we offer them. You can find them online on our Denton office website, as well as how to apply for them. And so just don't forget that this is a free resource that exists, for individuals that qualify for our services if they need to speak with an attorney for a little while. So after the presentation today, I understand that there will probably be some questions, which is totally fine. Just please know that our attorneys aren't able to just kind of dispense legal advice, but of course we always want to help whenever we can. So please feel free to email me with any questions that you have with good contact information. I'd be happy to follow up with you afterwards, especially if you need legal help. You might just have more questions. Whatever it is, I'm very happy to help. So, Tiffany Kilgore is going to be our next presenter. She's an attorney in our Denton office. She is a board certified family law attorney, and she also helps individuals with non disclosure and expunction agreements. And then after Tiffany, it's going to be Brittany Moore. She's an attorney from our Dallas office. She has created this incredible program that has just kind of taken a lot of our service area, especially in Dallas, by storm, and it's been incredibly effective about helping people get their driver's licenses back. And so I think that both of them will have some really valuable information. And so I'm really looking forward to you getting to hear it. So all that being said, thank you so much. And I'm going to turn it over to Tiffany.
I'm Tiffany Kilgore with Legal Aid of Northwest Texas, and I'm going to talk to y'all today about expunctions and non-disclosures. I know everyone is struggling with employment right now, and if you do have a blip on your record, this might be a way that you can make yourself a little more employable. Okay, so why do you need one? I mentioned employment already. Another reason would be if you were trying to get employment housing, government benefits, if you're trying to get licensed for a job. And what's the difference between the two? Um, so when you hear expunction, I want you to think erase. It's actually going to erase your arrest. It's going to destroy all of the documents associated with it, and you won't have to tell anyone that anything ever happened. A non-disclosure is kind of your second best choice, and it depends on what you're eligible for. When you hear non-disclosure, I want you to think that it seals the documents. You won't actually completely destroy it. Law enforcement will still be able to see it. Certain state entities will still be able to see it. But if you're going to apply with AT&T, with the cleaners down the street, they will not be able to see your charge in a background check. Now, with regards to an expunction, this is the erasure, and this is clearly the one that you want if you qualify. Um, if you are tried and acquitted, you can get an expunction. Uh, this is the one that I kind of laugh about. If Governor Abbott pardons you, you can get an expunction. Um, a more common way to get an expunction would be if you were arrested, but the district attorney's office never moved forward on it. Um, and you may say, well, how do they know about the arrest? Well, that arrest is still going to show up on your official criminal history record through the Texas Department of Public Safety. They're the state agency that is going to take care of that official record for everything above Class C tickets. Um, Another way that you're eligible is if your case is dismissed. If you get pretrial diversion and it's actually dismissed, then you are eligible. And finally, if you went through Veterans Court or Drug Court, you may be eligible for an expunction. I've also mentioned here Class C tickets. If you took deferred onto Class C, you might say, well, why do I care if somebody sees that I have a ticket? Well, you can also get ticketed for things like public intoxication, possession of drug paraphernalia, and those are maybe ones that you don't want an employer to see. With regards to an expunction, if you were arrested and nothing was ever filed, you would have to wait a certain time before you can get the expunction. And this is in case a prosecutor does eventually decide that they want to follow up on your case. It's 180 days for a Class C for a ticketable offense. For a misdemeanor, you have to wait a year from your arrest. And for a felony, you have to wait for 3 years for your arrest before you're eligible to get the expunction. Now, there is one exception. Um, you may be eligible for an offense to be expunged, but maybe it happened all in one day or all in one criminal episode. When you got arrested, you were charged for several different things. Now, here's the rub on that. Um, Here's my example. Let's say that you were arrested for possession of marijuana and for resisting arrest. Now, they convicted you on the possession charge, but they never arrested you for resisting arrest, or excuse me, they never prosecuted it. Well, unfortunately, you can't get that resisting arrest charge expunged because um, even though we're mostly electronic right now, I like to think of it in terms of pieces of paper. They can't go through and destroy part of that paper, but not the rest. Since it all came out of one time period, one arrest, one criminal episode, it's hard for them to destroy something and not the other. So everything would have to be eligible out of that same arrest. Um, Another exception, if you leave the jurisdiction against the terms of your bond, you would not be eligible for an expunction. If you were running basically and you left the state as usually the jurisdiction, then you wouldn't be eligible for that expunction. Um, Now, after the judge has signed the expunction, you generally have to set a hearing 30 days out, notify all the criminal agencies. If that judge has signed that expunction order, then you do not have to say anything about it. You can deny that the arrest occurred and you can deny that there's an expunction order out there. The only time that you might have to say anything is if you're being questioned under oath in a criminal proceeding. Um, you can just say that that question has been expunged, that that arrest has been expunged. That's all you have to say. Now, you told me that expunction meant erasure. Is it truly erased? Unfortunately, it's not. It's erased in terms of governmental agencies. It's erased by companies that have bought a criminal history record from the Texas government. Um, but if it's in a mentioned by a newspaper, if it's online, um, an employer could still find it. Um, a particular problem are mugshot companies that will publish your mugshot and then kind of a shell company. They'll say, go pay this company for me to remove it. Uh, the Texas and state government, Texas and federal government have tried to enact some laws to prevent this. They have not been very effective. So, with regards to expunctions and non disclosures, there's a possibility that your prospective employer will still be able to Google your name, find a mugshot, and in that case, you might want to think about disclosing it to your employer anyway, saying, I'm entitled to an expunction, however, it's still out there, but whatever the case may be, explain it. I was never charged, it was dismissed, um, and you may want to end up adopting that strategy. Now, with regards to non-disclosures, um, this is maybe not the one you want, but it may be the only one that you qualify for. Um, they aren't, for some offenses, you just can't do one. Not only can you not non-disclose that type of offense, but if you've ever been convicted of it, you won't be eligible for a non-disclosure on another charge. And I'll talk about those in a second. Um, Also, after you've been convicted or placed on deferred for the charge, you can't pick up a new charge. The whole point is, it's giving you a second chance. You've gotten this charge, but you're not continuing on with any criminal behavior. These are those disqualifying offenses that I was discussing. Um, Violent offenses, crimes against children, if you have to register as a sex offender. And I'll point out here any offenses involving family violence, even if it's not in the title of the charge, even if it's not assault family violence, um, if there's any kind of affirmative finding that that charge involved family violence, then that charge would not be eligible, and neither would any other charges in the future since you had been convicted of a family violence charge. Now, let's assume that you've met these hurdles. You haven't picked up a new charge. It's not a violent charge. It doesn't involve these charges I just discussed. The most common type is when you've received deferred adjudication, not straight probation, but deferred adjudication, you've completed it and the court has dismissed your case. um, for these type of scenarios, you can file immediately for some misdemeanors after it's dismissed following deferred adjudication. Um, Sometimes you have to wait 2 years on certain misdemeanors. And on felonies, it is 5 years after the court has dismissed it following deferred. Now, if you pick up a traffic ticket after your charge, this is not going to count against you. You just can't pick up a new misdemeanor or felony. Now, for most non-disclosures, the court does have some discretion. Expunctions are pretty much mandatory. If it follows the statute, you get it. However, for a non-disclosure, the court can just say, I'm not going to give her that. They may not like the way you smiled at them this morning. Now, a more typical outcome would be, um, for example, if they knew you were still struggling with substance abuse problems, that you hadn't been convicted, but that you were still using, that might be a reason that they don't think it's appropriate to grant the non-disclosure. What they want to see in order to grant this non-disclosure, the sealing of your records, is that you've made a mistake, but that you've rectified the problem, that you're continuing forward with no new criminal behavior. Um, Now, if you have a first-time offense, there are several exceptions to this kind of general rule. If you have a first-time misdemeanor that fits within a certain category of misdemeanors and you get deferred adjudication, then that can be a situation where the judge doesn't have this discretion. There's no best interest of justice standard. It's what we call an automatic disclosure because you automatically qualify. Again, if you're a first-time offender, and here's the exception here. Generally, if you get straight probation and not deferred, you are not eligible for a non-disclosure. However, if this is your first offense, no prior convictions, no prior deferred adjudication sentences, you would still be eligible for a non-disclosure. And this is even if you did shock probation. That is, if you had to go to jail for a certain period of time before your probation period began. And again, if you're a first time offender, even if it's a DWI, you could be eligible for a non disclosure. Um, for this to apply, you couldn't have injured anyone in a wreck resulting from your DWI. Um, and you would have to wait for 2 years after you finished your probation. If you had interlock on your car, that's where you breathe in to the device to start your car. If you had interlock for at least 6 months, you would wait for 2 years after you finished your probation. If you didn't have that interlock for at least 6 months, you would have to wait 5 years following the probation. Um, these are not exhaustive. Um, there are some other situations where you can get a non-disclosure even though you didn't successfully complete a deferred adjudication sentence, particularly if it's your first offense and you think you might be eligible. Just contact us. It's very easy, very quick for us to take a look and see if you qualify, and it could make a big difference in your employment prospects, housing, that type of thing. Um, Now, the same with the expunctions, you do not have to tell your employer that you've been the subject of any criminal proceeding or your prospective employer. Um, and finally, who can see the sealed record because it's not been destroyed? The police can see it. If you were asking for a name change or if you were asking to be a guardian for a disabled adult or for a senior adult with dementia, the courts can see this charge. CPS can see it, MHMR can see it, and finally, state agencies that license professionals can also see it. Um, so if you're contemplating a non-disclosure and the purpose is for licensing that type of thing, you might want to check with us or check with another attorney to see if it will be effective for what you're needing it for. Um, If you do have to move forward on your own, texaslawhelp.org is a website that's a good resource. It has some information on there for you to kind of click through and answer some questions to see if you're eligible. It also has forms for you to petition on your own for an expunction or a non-disclosure. Of course, that's a service that we provide for you if you're financially eligible for us. And we urge you to give us a call here at 940-383-1406 if you think that you might be eligible for an expunction or a non-disclosure and that could improve your employment prospects. Thank you so much.
My name is Brittany Moore, and I'm a staff attorney with Legal Aid of Northwest Texas. And I'll be talking to you about what we can do to help you with driver's license restoration. So the biggest need for the homeless population and our indigent population is the need for identification. I actually sometimes call my presentation ID restoration because people need it. It's essential to getting a job, to getting housing, and to getting in a car to be able to drive to work or drive to and from home. And in a lot of cases, our homeless population, they often lose their identification, and with these barriers on their license, they're not able to get another one or renew it, which can prevent them to get access to benefits, and then also even just to get into a shelter, sometimes to get meals. And so very important need, and this is what we can do to help. So as I mentioned, a broader kind of overview is ID restoration and not just driver's license. And that's just because these are different things that we can also help with at Legal Aid of Northwest Texas. So name changes, birth certificate amendments. We have a lot of clients who maybe their parents misspelled their name when they were born, or they just went by a different name their entire lives, or they were adopted and never really knew that they had a totally different name on their birth certificate, things like that. We can help consolidate that for you. And so that way, moving forward with your life is much easier because all of your documents are the same name. Declarations, name changes, as I mentioned, passports, replacement documents, and that's replacement immigration documents. So we can't help get the documents, but if it's lost, which again happens a lot with our transient homeless population, then we can help you obtain those again, so you can make sure to have those on your person at all times. DD 214, that's military ID, and then of course IDs and driver's license. So we can help with all of those things here at Legal Aid. So tickets, that is kind of the biggest thing that I wanted to talk about today. Traditionally, this is not something that we took on. Now we can and we do. And so our style of representation is totally different than private representation. So in most cases, people can afford it, can hire an attorney, they'll go to court for them, try to get them a deal. Normally you used to have to pay a few $100s or do defensive driving and things like that. Or maybe they'll go to the court and do a payment plan. We don't do any of that. Our clients can't pay anything. When they got the ticket in the first place, that was $200 or $300. They couldn't afford that. That ticket then became a warrant, which doubled the price up to $600. Then the next time they got pulled over a year later, they got whatever that ticket was they were pulled over for. In addition to that, a driving without a valid driver's license ticket, which then added another $1,000 to the other $600 they owed to this other court. And then the cycle just goes on and on and on to the point where this becomes an insurmountable barrier for our clients. And that's why we step in. With Class C misdemeanors, traditionally you have a right to hire counsel, but you are not given counsel, much like all other criminal cases. And these are often, and they are, are fine-only cases, which is why we can step in at Legal Aid and help you with them. And so, because what we're doing with the court is we won't go to the court and say, hey, they didn't run this stoplight, or they didn't, swerve, or whatever the case may be. We are really concerning ourselves with the matter that you can't pay, right? That our clients can't pay. So we're just telling the court, whatever happened, whatever they did or didn't do, what we're just saying is they can't pay this consequence. It's impossible. And this is something that will prevent them from getting identification, from getting a job, from getting housing, from getting all of those things I mentioned earlier. And so we just want to tell the court, can we give them something else, another opportunity to take care of these tickets that they can actually reach, a goal they can actually reach, because they'll never have the money for this and it's just getting worse. And so we just go to the court, say they can't pay, so can you dismiss it, waive it, or grant community service? And that's what we do. And we are prepared to enter a plea of no contest in order to do that. And so, as I mentioned, the different ways that private attorneys, they'll get you on like deferred driving course, things like that, which will still cost a lot of times money, right? And if our clients could have paid that, they would have did that in the beginning and they wouldn't have come to us for help in the first place. And so our clients are really just concerned with the fact that, you know, they can't pay that $300, that's their light bill or part of their rent each month. And so that's where we can step in to request that waiver of fines and fees based on our criminal code that allows us to do so. So these are a couple things that I just wanted to show you that is free and the public can access. And this is something I use to screen all my driver's license clients. The first website is this failuretoappear.com link over here on the left that's underlined. Over here on the right is just a sample of what that looks like. So basically, when you put in your license and date of birth into that link, it'll tell you what FTAs have created omni holds, and that's holds specific to your driver's license, and because likely they become warrants. Now, oftentimes this website does not reflect all of the tickets you have outstanding, right? So like if you know you have a ticket somewhere else that doesn't appear on here, you still have to take care of that ticket. These are just the courts that have put the omni hold on you. And this is where you can go to see it. Again, it's free. Anybody can go to this website. Here is a second website that I check when I screen my driver's license clients. And this is the driver's license eligibility webpage. Again, free, open to the public, anybody to use. You just need your driver's license, last four of your social, and your date of birth. This website will actually tell you of any holds or suspensions you have over your license outside of tickets. As many of you know, or if you've experienced this, tickets sometimes is not the only barrier to your license. Sometimes it's just a hard suspension from having too many tickets in your life. Sometimes it's a suspension resulting from a drug conviction or a DWI conviction, maybe a medical hold because at one point you were deemed not able to drive safely. And that is something that can be remedied if you fixed that medical situation. And just various, the list goes on, right? Child support, things like that. All of those holds or suspensions will show up on this link that I just showed you. Again, free and open to the public, and it'll say over here, this highlighted portion, your license is currently not eligible or is eligible. I recommend that this search be done both under your ID number and driver's license number if you have had both here in Texas. And that's just because DPS really didn't do well about consolidating those records. So check both if you have had both in Texas, just to make sure they reflect the same information. It's never the wrong information, right? So if one says eligible and the other says not eligible, it's not eligible. So definitely check under both numbers. If you've only ever had one, or if you only just had an ID number, then just check under that one. Another thing I wanted to point out, just for the people to know, a lot of courts will let you request it on your own, so you don't have to go through us. It's just courts are very difficult when it comes to this. And so that's why we've taken on these cases to help people get through this finding of indigency. So courts will give them community service because some courts really don't tell you you can get community service, but you can in every single court. And when you do, and when you ask or if offered, one of the things I'd like you to know is that you can absolutely request, if you are in one of these programs listed here, to have that count as community service. So if you're in a job skills program, a treatment program, counseling program, getting your GED, all of those hours can actually count towards court-ordered community service. So if you are ordered and you are in one of these programs, absolutely just make sure the judge knows and will approve that as your service hours. Another thing, as I mentioned, outside of tickets, we can help you with those other suspensions. One of the biggest way we help with suspensions is just by kind of going through them and getting people an occupational license. This license is restricted. So normally it's like you can drive from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Because it's specifically for the purpose of that essential need. It's called an occupational license because typically it's awarded to people who need it to get to work. One of the things people don't know is that even if you don't have a job, but you are actively searching for one, so you're homeless and you can't get a job because you don't have a license, right? Again, that cycle. Um, Judges realize that. So if you can bring a letter from an employer that says, I would hire John Doe if he had a license and was able to drive, I will take that letter to a judge and say, okay, can you give them an occupational, right? The single mother who really doesn't have time to work, but needs a job, but can't get the job without a license, she can petition for an occupational license. And that's because it's still an essential need, right? So an essential need is anything that is essential. It is essential for a single mother or single father to need to drive to and fro for their children, to school, to the grocery store, and so on and so forth. So that will still qualify for essential need. And like being a caretaker for elderly person, that can qualify for an essential need. So there are other sort of gaps that you can reach for in order to get an occupational, not just to drive for work, which is the biggest one, of course, but needing to get a job, again, is another reason. The other type of occupational license is an interlock. Based on an interlock need. So a lot of people with DWIs, you can't get an essential need occupational, you have to get an interlock occupational, which is basically telling the court, I know my driving privileges were taken because of my endangerment to the community, but I'm requesting that you allow me this very limited scope to drive to and from work for whatever reason. And so this is often a little bit more complicated because it goes right back to the judge that ordered your conviction from the DWI. We do take on these cases as well. Just kind of, those are played kind of really close to the vest because we want to make sure you're not wasting your time and money when we petition for these. So we do often try to screen how many DWIs you've had in the past, because at the end of the day, that's what the judge is going to ask and that's what the DA is going to say. And we want to make sure everyone's on the same page and everybody feels good about granting you this, because if the judge doesn't feel good about putting you back on the road, they're going to deny it, and that would have been a waste of your time. And I say that because you do have to buy special insurance to get any occupational license, and that's SR22 insurance. It's basically insurance for people who keep driving without a license. Even if you don't have a car, you can have this requirement put on you. And so it's a little bit pricier. And so as I said, before we go down that road, I always want to make sure my clients that it's pretty much a sure thing. So you're not wasting your money on that insurance. And that's pretty much it. We are here to answer any questions for you. If you need our help with any of the things that I mentioned, you can apply online or by phone. We have a legal aid line. Each office has their own in-office number and intake, which you can also look up online at landwith.org. Or like I said, just apply online or by phone through our legal aid line number. Here is my information. My name is Brittany Moore again. That is my office phone number. Actually soon to change, so probably should stick to email if you have any questions.